The worldwide news report that possible message from space has been received all around the world that reads, "I'm going to drop by." But while that happens, a ship is getting attacked by terrorists at sea. But a girl donning a battle suit skillfully takes down every terrorist and is instructed to seize their cargo until the captain threatens to blow the ship up, so she surrenders. Until she says a port, summoning 2 pistols and disarming him up with her bullets. But suddenly, an apparent spaceship races past them at incredible speed, making them lose stability, and the captain blows the ship up. Afterwards, we meet Kyo Kakazu, a 16-year-old boy who's at a family party with his uncle Yuchi. But finding out he's still single, he tries having him check out a smoking hot girl there, but who also has cat ears and a tail. But Yuchi tries giving her beer, pissing Kyo off, but the girl is just in love with all the food because she hasn't eaten in a while, as she forgot to load food onto her ship, but then met a cat that told her to come here. As she reveals, she's named Eris, but Kyo panics seeing her enormous boobs and obliviously drinks Yuchi's beer, making him instantly pass out. Afterwards, he awakes in his room, but feels something squishy next to him, because Eris is sleeping semi-naked next to him to his shock. But as he hit his head earlier, Eris with a device instantly cures his pain and explains she's here because Yuchi told her to sleep wherever she liked. But a girl then calls Kyo downstairs, but he's nervous, not wanting Eris to be seen. But this girl's Kinju Manami, his neighbor, who teases him with the girl she saw him bring home yesterday, until Eris herself shows up, and Manami's shocked at her huge boobs, though Kyo has her go change. But Manami now calls him a pervert for making someone cosplay as a kitty for him. But someone else hears this, Majo Inokazu, Kyo's teacher, who's here to talk about his club camp. And Eris then comes back now in her suit. But Inokazu's also shocked at her boobs and reproaches Kyo up for having her cosplay too. But Eris has them feel up her tail and ears, demonstrating they're real. Because she's an alien who, researching Earth, thought she'd drop in to their shock. But Itokazu's later just mad that aliens look like humans and demands actual proof, when suddenly, Eris' bell collar glows and shows a hologram of a robot cat named Luros, her ship's eye, who warns that she's been discovered, which they can see on the news. But Eris has Luros warn them that they're not here to attack and escape from there, though Manami and Itokazu then decide to leave, but appear pissed. Later, Eris tells Kyo she's a Keishin from Keisha, but someone's spying on them, who's armed to the teeth, and tells a hell of a hottie named Jack of all of this, but with the condition she participates in this mission. And at night, Itokazu has an online cult-like meeting, revealing she's met with this subject, but claims their first contact can't be with something as simple as this. So they decide to send her aid from the Navy and Air Force for a beautiful contact. The next day, Kyo asks Eris to look over the place while he's out, but outside he runs into his friend Aoi Futaba, who he thanks for, as she lent him DVDs. But as Futaba nervously tries asking him to go with her buy DVDs, a man stops his car by, claiming to know Futaba, so she'll drive her home and decide to postpone it till tomorrow. But in the car, the man reveals he's here due to an emergency job for her. But teasing her with Kyo and what she really is, she summons a gun and points it at him, because she's the fighter who fought the terrorists on the ship, and shoots, but just the windshield, and has him give her the job details to eliminate a dangerous illegal immigrant and silence her aides. But she's later regretful, because her targets are Eris and Kyo. Itokazu, furious that Eris isn't a weird ass creature, but just a regular humanoid, meets with a group of armed people to prevent Eris from being mankind's first contact, while Eris spends her day having fun with Kyo, who explains that the Keishin's goal after having done everything to death in their stable society is to explore space and meet with other species, while Manami spies on them as her mission's nigh. But Eris suddenly figures she must pay Kyo for compensation, and according to material she read, figures she pay with her body. But that material are Kyo's porn magazines under his bed, and she's explained that's just fiction, to her relief, as she has no actual reproductive experience, while Manami finds them filthy, and Futaba reminisces on Kyo, shocked at her mission. The next day, Eris shows Kyo and Yuchi beings that suddenly pop up from the ground who obey Eris' commands, as asteroids, creating them with nanomachine capsules that restructure the soil's elements to assist in her research. And so they follow her and Kyo outside, but as Eris feels it's too hot, Kyo shows her of ice cream, which she adores. But Manami's pissed, spying on them still, while Futaba, in a truck, prepares for her mission. And after researching the entire day in the library, Kyo and Eris finally leave, and Manami and Futaba's missions begin. But Kyo notices everything's empty and are suddenly ambushed, but by a third party, the beautiful Contact Society, making Manami and Futaba be held on standby, while Eris is warned to leave Earth immediately. But as she pisses off one of them he's about to shoot, but Kyo gets in the way and gets hit. But at this, Futaba breaks protocol and protects Kyo from them. But she's also instructed to kill Eris. But Kyo, not knowing it's Futaba, begs her not to regardless. so she allows them to go, disobeying her orders. But Jack suddenly arrives and shoots Kyo and Eris with tranquilizing darts. But Yuchi also suddenly arrives and throws a flashbang, while Kyo sees a woman take Eris with a dented watch. Afterwards, Kyo wakes up in Yuchi's car, which is filled with asteroids, but couldn't rescue Eris. But Kyo wants to help her, so he calls Minami asking where Eris is because he noticed Minami's dented watch back then, which she recognizes, explaining she did this because she wants to get a job at the CIA, but reveals Eris is in a military base nearby. But Yuchi figures they'll need a guide because he's more than what he shows, while Kyo calls Futaba, apologizing because he won't be able to accompany her tomorrow, as she's dismayed. And while Beautiful Contact laments their failed mission, they're suddenly ambushed by Yuchi and Kyo, who's surprised seeing Itokazu here as Yuchi takes their picture and blackmails with exposing them in exchange of a favor, while Minami is visited by Futaba. And Yuchi has Beautiful Contact sneak them into the base, where Eris awakes in a pod and is told she'll die by a scientist as her existence is problematic to Japan. But she smells they reek of dog, shocking him, which gives away they established contact with Dogashuan's dog people, which Eris claims are illegal to form relations with in the universe. But explosions are suddenly felt outside by Yuchi, who leaves Beautiful Contact behind to go rescue Eris. But the base is also being invaded by Minami and Futaba in an armored vehicle, while the asteroids break into the base and Yuchi serves as distraction for Kyo. But Eris claims it's time for her to leave and with ease breaks out of the pod, because her outfit's also a powered suit. And as Kyo goes to Eris, he finds the place destroyed and a freed Eris, as he figures she didn't need help, but she's happy he came for her regardless, hugging his face against her bruise. But outside, Yuchi's overwhelmed, but is saved by the girls and hear from Kyo that he's with Eris in Itokazu's car, as they later meet and await for a helicopter piloted by the asteroids, but it's shot down as tanks approach them. But the asteroids survived, and with Eris and rubber hammers created of quasi-antimatter, something the Caitians employ as they don't believe in killing, they hit the tanks, annihilating all non-living matter around them, but leaving the pilots alive. After all this, the incident was covered up. But after some time, Eris has now finished recollecting her data, so it's time for her to leave Earth. But telling Kyo that she was very happy when he came to save her, tells him that she'll be entering her first mating season soon, and wants him to be her mate. But they're suddenly warned of the news as Eris sees her motherships on Earth. And Eris is visited by two Caitians, because thanks to her reports on the delicious food, they've decided to establish formal relations with Japan. So, they drop by. But meanwhile, a girl is mocking the humans' failure, while a dog laughs. The Caitia's crew, represented by their captain Kun, the Dr. Durrell, Melwin, Chika, and Eris, establish relations with Japan's representatives, in swimsuits, which were Eris' idea. But meanwhile, Minami spied over outside her home, and figures it's time to escape with Futaba. And meanwhile, the Caitians are asking Kyo to use his home for a while, but he's just surprised by their swimsuits as Kun explains Eris said these would be great for negotiating. But she read that from Kyo's magazines again. But Manami's suddenly there with Futaba, who is shocked at seeing everyone's boobs, so Kyo has them change, and the process makes them appear naked, to their dismay. But after that, Futaba reveals they're here to say goodbye, while we see the main participants of Eris Raid's profiles in a meeting between the scientists who held Eris captive and a woman with dog ears named Jens and her asteroid dog, Muttley, who warns that they can't allow the Caitians to open formal relations with Earth, as if it happens, Japan will lose their trade benefits with the Dogashuans. Meanwhile, Minami explains to Kyo that their organizations will hunt them down after helping Eris, so they have to flee. But as Kyo asks the Caitians if they can help, Kun claims that Kyo's home's currently serving as the provisional Caitian embassy, so attacking it would mean war, which means they can just take shelter here, to their shock. Afterwards, Eris stays as Kun's crew leaves, and the asteroids signal this as the Caitian embassy, but they're being washed over. And later, they bring over Minami's stuff from her house. But as Kyo asks if Futaba won't call her family, she reveals she has none. But telling Kyo not to worry while blushing, Minami notices something's up. But meanwhile outside, someone's trying to capture an asteroid, but fails. Though after bringing in Minami's stuff, she says they have names, so they decide to number them, but accidentally name two of them 17. And later, while Kyo bathes, number 6 offers to wash his back. But he talks about regretting that Minami and Futaba sacrificed their future for him, while he's unable to help. And later, she baths with Futaba, but questions Futaba what does she see in Kyo, knowing she likes him, making her blush. But Futaba asks back if Minami likes him, but she claims there's no way, but that she almost got close to liking him once, recalling that he was shy with girls when he was young. But at one point, he began treating her like he would with the boys, figuring he stopped seeing her as a woman, so she stopped caring. But claims that Kyo definitely thinks of Futaba as a girl. Meanwhile, the asteroids outside change guards, while someone spies them but notices they're both labeled 17. While Futaba shows Minami that she's not an ordinary girl, teleported to a soap bar with a port, her special ability which she was born with to teleport objects within a 50-meter radius to her. But it's also the reason her family abandoned her, and was then raised to get bloodstained killer. But the S-Asteroid's alarms suddenly go off, so Futaba and Manami go on the offensive, seeing that someone's escaping with an S-Asteroid. But teleporting a sniper, Futaba stops their car and interrogate them. But the driver claims they serve a noble master, and with a flashbang they escape, but leaving the S-Asteroid behind. But Eris and Kyo end up seeing them naked, to their dismay. Later, Manami rests with Futaba, but while Manami's angry at Kyo, Futaba claims it wasn't his fault. But Manami sees she indeed likes Kyo, but warns her to act now, as otherwise, Eris will take him away. But the next day, Eris asks them all if they'd like to become employees of the embassy, especially Manami and Futaba, as their security police. But Manami suddenly gets called by Jack, who isn't mad at Manami, and instead warns her that an organization's targeting Eris. But while Kyo explains to Eris that Jack is Manami's boyfriend, she exclaims Jack's a woman named Janus Electus Cartoinus Calinert, hence Jack, surprising Kyo, who thought she was dating someone. But now curious to ask Kyo something, she decides not to while blushing, which Futaba notices. While in a yacht, the perpetrator of last night's attack laments her failure to her master, but assures her she'll get the divine embodiment. In a huge arena, the cult gathers, of people with fake cattails and ears because they worship all the cute parts of a cat and loathe being descended from apes. But with the appearance of Eris, with real kitty ears and tail, their founder claims Eris is the true guru of their society, the underside of the kitten's paw, as she begins Operation Unia. While Kyo finds Eris excitedly dancing with her S-Asteroids because she got intoxicated with Manami's cat powder and wants to steal it and then have Kyo feed her from his mouth. When an S-Asteroid stabs her ass with a syringe thanks to Dural as Eris recovers her senses. But Dural attributes her quick intoxication to her looming mating season, but calls her lucky, having gotten Kyo as a partner already. But as Manami angrily objects, Kyo just nervously runs away. The Dural then reveals she's here to tell Eris that their superiors want her to go to Tokyo. And meanwhile, Futaba's received a package of 2 S-Asteroids of her own. But Jen's meanwhile found out that the Kaitians are going to Tokyo, so she decides to go there as well. While Eris heads to Tokyo with Kyo, Manami, Futaba, and 1 S-Asteroid. But the cultists have found this out. Afterwards, now in Tokyo with Futaba's S-Asteroids, who she had labeled as luggage, they end up going to a shopping mall because Eris was tasked by her team to examine the relationship between culture and knowledge with finance, or rather, buy them tons of manga and toys. But as Kyo accompanies her, and she gets confused by a figure of a Nico girl, Manami and Futaba appear displeased. But while Eris is shopping, they all end up distracted by novelty items they like, and waste their money on them to their dismay. But later, at a train station, Futaba notices the station's bare and empty and figures it's a trap, claiming magic has been performed here to keep everyone out. So she instructs everyone aboard the next train, while she stays behind to deal with the perpetrator. And Jen sees it's indeed magic as a barrier with spiritrons is used to keep everyone out, but perpetrated by an unknown party. While the ones behind this see that Futaba took the bait, armed maids who proceed with their plan. And while Futaba breaks free from the magic, she hears there's been an accident with her friend's train. As we see that Manami noticed the train had no ads, so it's a trap. But Futaba's now there, who manages to get in the maid's train. But she's pushed out, but she survived. And later, Chika, who's seeing over Kyo's house, is told Eris been kidnapped. But the Kaitians can't do anything about it, having not formalized their friendship tree yet. But that it's fine if Manami and Futaba do, as Futaba requests electronic warfare specialized S-Asteroid and Manami her S-Asteroid. And with a shot, Futaba opens a wall, a secret depot, filled with guns of her former employer, while Kyo and Eris sleep on a bed. And the kitten cult is seeing her from everywhere. Their divine embodiment that'll lead them into a utopia. And Jack informs Manami that the cult's the one behind the kidnapping, led by their founder, Antonio Morphinos, a heiress of a multimillionaire, with her main base being a battle cruise. Kyo and Eris wake up in a fancy room and are told by the maid with the eye patch, Sara, that they're in the private room of the divine embodiment of the kitty ear order underside of the kitten's paw, which turns out is Eris, to their shock. But as Eris tries ordering her release, Sarah can't due to Antonia's wishes, and instead she's treated for a feast, which they decide to stay for. While Antonia plans on getting close to Eris without raising suspicion. But meanwhile, Jens has found out about Antonia's cult, her base, and Eris' location, and has decided to take them all down. Meanwhile, Futaba with Manami are asking for a powerboat to an arms dealer, but the only one he has is already booked, by Yuchi, because it's for a movie director friend of his, but find out it's in an island. And meanwhile, after Eris and Kyo feasted, they decide to escape with Eris' power suit. But punching the wall only gives her pain, finding out that due to mating season, her suit's functions are restricted due to potential misuse, so she can't use her super strength, nor call Luros, nor her S-Asteroids. But a maid, Maya, comforts Eris and Matt a built-in S-Asteroid for her, as a gigantic one comes through a door named Unia, as they're assured no one's inside it. Meanwhile, Futaba and Manami plan the rescue and drop from a plane to the boat's location, while Eris and Kyo are taken to an indoors theme park and Eris has fun with the asteroid in it. But as Kyo notices the arcade games that are only for one player, he's explained that Antonia doesn't play with anyone as she can't be beaten, nor can they fake letting her win, which Kyo appears concerned at. Meanwhile, Futaba and Manami have gotten hold of the powerboat and now wait for Antonia's crews to pass close by. But suddenly, Manami asks Futaba what she likes about Kyo, making her nervous, but explains she finds him cool and kind, the opposite of her, though Futaba remembers her blushing before. But they're suddenly approached by an effeminate bald man, Kawasaki Tako, the movie director, who Futaba recognizes from B-grade action movies with women, though Kawasaki figures are actresses and tells them to change. And later, without choice, they ended up changing into swimsuits with bunny ears. But as it's time, they now steal a powerboat alongside the asteroids. But Kawasaki decides to film anyways. And as they approach Antonia's ship, it goes into attack mode and engage in battle. But they have the electronic warfare as asteroids sabotage their fire and control systems. But the ship's also suddenly attacked by teleporting missiles by Gens, who prepares her asteroids to attack, while Manami's asteroid with quasi-antimatter bullets penetrate the ship's hull as they all invade it, while Kyo is wearing Eris Power's suit, which works because he's not in mating season. Meanwhile, the girls and their asteroids make their way in, as Sarah can't fight the asteroids because they're too cute, and some engage against the dog asteroids, though they easily beat them up. Meanwhile, Futaba in her battle suit shuts down the ship's power, but suddenly she's attacked by someone in another power suit. But she can't attack back because the suit is Dabdishuan technology. But she summons a gun and shoots behind her neck, which, knowing it's a weakness, shuts down her suit. But Futaba is then surprised, seeing the pilot, Gens, has dog ears. Trying to escape, Gens traps her and has her location be blasted, knocking Futaba unconscious and making the ship start sinking. Meanwhile, Manami finds Eris and Hio, but Antonia and Maya run into them, who demands Eris back because there's nothing the founder can't have. But Kyo points out Antonia has no friends to spend her life with, which shocks Antonia and resonates with her, who recognizes her wrongdoing and apologizes and offers to them to escape with her. But the asteroid, having detected Futaba's life signs, warns that she's unconscious in the engine room, but Maya claims it's too far away. But Kyo is gone for her, and as everybody escapes, Kyo gets out carrying Futaba, who, seeing Kyo and thinking it's a dream, thinks, "I love you." In space, the Caitians analyze Futaba's battle suit after her battle and find out the Dogdishuans are on Earth to illegally trade with humans and to stop the Caitians from forming diplomatic relations with them. Meanwhile, Kida, who's gotten his own asteroid, invites Eris to his video club because they want to film an alien movie with Eris in it. But Eris suddenly excitedly asks him to bring her because she's now in heat. But they suddenly hear shots outside as we see Futaba's training Manami up, but Kyo has them stopped despite Manami's insistence, though Eris figures they need a place to practice. Meanwhile, Gens and the scientist who had Eris captive now know that the Caitians have become allies with Antonia's order, which will pose a problem. But Gens won't give up. Meanwhile, in a restaurant, Manami, keen on helping Futaba end up with Kyo, tells her to make home-cooked lunch for him. Though later, Manami's frustrated because she can only practice with fake guns now, and Futaba burnt up her attempt of a dish. But Chick is now there, called by Eris, to take them to a place to practice. Meanwhile, Eris is with Kyo and his clubmates, but they don't find Eris too alien-y, as Eterkazu agrees in the background for the movie, so Eris summons her spaceship, but it looks like it's suspended by strings, though they're part of the ship, but it looks fake. And the asteroid doesn't cut it either. So they decide to film a romantic movie instead, while Eris in heat gets on top of Kyo, so he can breed her to his dismay. While Chick has taken Futaba and Manami to the Caitians' virtual room, where they can simulate and project about anything. So Futaba has it project a kitchen with Kyo as the food tester, and Manami summons a shooting range with weapons and a minigun, which she can't lift. But she summons Kyo to lift it up, but he refuses, though just like the real one would. And after confirming it indeed behaves like the real Kyo, Manami asks what he thinks of Eris. But as he just says she's alright, she has him answer honestly. So he points out her big boost to her anger. But asking what about Futaba, he finds her cute, but feels kind of sorry for her, as she was always alone, but thought it'd be great if they could be friends, seeing their common tastes. But then, Futaba asks what about herself. But Kido finds her as a violent gun-freak tomboy, but that she's smart and cheerful, which is why he liked her. But being shy, he couldn't talk to her. And when he heard her talking with Jack, figured his chance was over. But Manamis can't believe this, shocked and angry, and thinks he's blaming her for not confessing to him, but Kyo apologizes, claiming it's his fault instead, as Manami cries. But the scenario then changes to a time when Manami was racing Kyo on her bike, but when Kyo overtook her, she couldn't believe the weak Kyo was growing up. But as she yelled at him to not leave her behind, she lost control. And so Kido ended up carrying her on his bike, though her new watch had become dented, as she asks Kyo if he'd never leave her behind. Afterwards, back on Kyo's home, Futaba has him try her egg rolls, but they taste bad. But telling Chika that the Kyo from the virtual room said they were delicious, she explains that was just a projection that answered based on how the Kyo on her mind would react, making Manami realize that was all just her, but still feels bad. And meanwhile, Eris is taking pills because due to all the risks, her first mating season's been suspended to her dismay, but yells for Kyo to wait for her next time. Summer vacation's over and school's starting again, but Kyo's class is receiving a new student, Eris. Because Kun felt bad for cutting Eris' mating season short, so she sent Eris to survey an educational institution. But it was just so she'd be with Kyo. But Antonia's also transferring in, with Maya and Sarah. But later, as Kyo was uncomfortable with the attention, Maya and Sarah scared everyone off with guns, though had to vouch for his clubmates, who ask if he's going to their club camp. But Eris wants to go, and so does Antonia and her maids, and the Assistroids. And Manami inscribes herself and Futaba, telling her they can't let Kyo be alone with Eris. But meanwhile, dog Assistroids move in the ocean floor, and at night, they attack a couple. The next day, Kyo's club head to the club camp with Antonia providing the transport. But meanwhile, people have been reporting electronic devices have been stolen from multiple homes, while we see a robot in the bushes. Afterwards, the students arrive at the camp, which is at a beach, but Futaba and Manami get shocked when Kyo mentions changing into swimsuits, because they didn't bring any. But Antonia is allowing them all to use any swimsuits she prepared for Eris she won't use. And after a while, they all come out in them. Afterwards, Kyo and Futaba film together, though Manami watches from afar, figuring it's too late for her. Later, everyone enjoys a feast by Antonia, but then Kyo has something to ask Futaba, but she says to go for a walk in that case, which Manami notices. And so Kyo tells Futaba that he thinks she's the one who'd be best, and shocked, thinking it's a love confession, Kyo exclaims he wants her to teach him how to fight, which dazes her. Meanwhile, Antonia's maids have brought over a model closer to a real Assistroid of a gigantic battle armor, and meanwhile, Manami sees Kyo's returned, but without Futaba because she wanted to be alone for a while. While we see Futaba lamenting herself that she's just a doll that fights. But Eris, thinking that Kyo was there, suddenly shows up there. When Futaba suddenly says she hates her looks, and her being a cute, nice alien, and how she's always with Kyo, claiming she liked him first, but cries, claiming she's useless with friends, so she can't win. But as Eris recognizes Kyo is very important to Futaba, she exclaims she could get through any mission thanks to knowing he was there. But Eris comforts her, as she also feels at ease when she's with Kyo, which is what Futaba exactly feels. But they're suddenly interrupted by a random girl eating Antonia's food named Ichika, but who points out their friends are under attack. But she first wants to talk to Futaba. Meanwhile, they see they're being attacked by tires, but see the dog Assistroids stealing their equipment, but it was a trap for their own Assistroids, as they're about to be attacked by missiles, and Eris and Kyo are attacked by the Assistroids. But Futaba, with insane speed and strength and glowing cards on her body, suddenly brings them all down, while Sarah destroys the missiles, and they all eventually win the fight. Afterwards, Futaba explains these cards are from Ichika, though they don't know who she is, while Ichika from afar claims the Axel form cards work just right. Afterwards, they see that the dog Assistroids were the same ones that sank in Antonia's ship, but were gathering equipment to repair themselves, while Kaya reassures Futaba that he wants her to teach him how to fight. Afterwards, Ichika sent the Assistroids as respected fallen soldiers to Gens, though she was confused by this. In Akation's virtual room, Manami's with Futaba and Kyo, as she teaches him how to handle guns. While on Earth, Ichika teaches Eris of her Axel form cards that employ spiritrons and seem like magic, but it's just advanced technology. Though Manami then teleports in, having left Futaba and Kyo alone. And meanwhile, Gens analyzes Futaba's unknown magic from her battle, but has a plan to make the humans realize they shouldn't form relations with the Akations, which uses that magic. Meanwhile, Futaba and Kyo take a break in a simulated beach. But asking why does Kyo want to learn how to fight, he explains he wants to be able to defend everyone. And seeing how her, Manami, and Eris all have something that stands out, he wants something too. But Futaba says he shouldn't force himself to have something he doesn't need to have, thinking on how her family abandoned her due to her power. Though, they then notice Manami's gone. So Futaba then finds her in Kyo's house, but is mad as Manami hasn't trained at all, and proves she isn't ready by shooting her rice bowl, but Manami claims she knew she wasn't aiming at her, which leads them to wrestle and fight and end up destroying each other's clothes with quasi-antimatter bullets. But they decide to have a contest then, where the loser will do what the winner says, though Kyo ends up running into them naked again. Meanwhile, Gens plans something up with two women, while Manami and Futaba have their duel in a jungle. But as they try to outsmart each other, they both think on how the other doesn't know how they feel. Because Manami was trying to leave Futaba and Kyo alone, but Futaba, with her bloody past, can't have Kyo be involved with her. While Manami thinks she let her own chance slip away. As it begins raining, and she wonders why she didn't realize sooner that she loves Kyo. But Kyo, seeing this rain at home, comes up with something. But as the rain stops, Manami shoots after hearing movement, though it's just a bird. But she gave her location away and now directly fights Futaba. But deleting Manami's gun, Futaba tries rushing but accidentally drops her magazine by trying to avoid some birds. And Manami won. And the thing she asks her to do is to kiss Kyo. But Futaba nervously refuses, so instead, Manami wants him to address him by his first name, as she always calls him Kakazu. But asking if Manami's sure, knowing her feelings, Futaba suddenly saves her from a sniper shot after spotting a laser on her, as they're attacked by Gen's women. But Futaba has a plan, and has Manami rush as the lure and as the shooter, because Futaba protects her from the sniper's bullet by destroying it mid-air with a quasi-antimatter bullet, and Manami strips the snipers naked and surround them. Afterwards, Manami and Futaba return home to a feast of soup. Kyo's idea, so the girls warm up from the rain. But as Futaba tries thanking him as Kakazu, Manami pinches her leg, and Futaba ends up calling him by his first name. But Kyo doesn't notice, and despite Futaba being fine with it, Manami angrily headlocks him up. And meanwhile, Gens has received the sniper women in a box. From Keisha, a crew travels to Earth with a passenger named Lori, who notices the ships playing a song which came from one of their reports from Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, after Cheika's visit, Eris tells her friends that the very first model of asteroid made by Keisha, around 1,000 years ago, is coming to Earth, explaining that she was built to work on their first space survey ship, but it also became their first space shipwreck, and wasn't recovered until recently. So she wishes to come to Earth to see the outcome of their failed mission. So she'll stay in the embassy, though Eris appears bothered throughout the day. Afterwards, with Laurie's ship now having arrived at the Keishan's ship, Kyo and Eris and all the asteroids await for her. And as Eris explains that asteroids used to look different before until recently, Laurie teleports in, who looks like a beautiful woman, as all the asteroids celebrate their grandmother's arrival. Later, Laurie explains to Kyo that Keishans at first thought asteroids should look like them to be able to help, but they eventually changed their model because some ended up convinced they were actually people, which would lead to problems, because they're nothing than just tools. Though Kyo doesn't see them that way, which she recognizes seeing his asteroids are happy, treated as friends. And as Eris returns from shopping, Laurie asks them to show her around, feeling the need to see the night sky. Kyo agrees, but Eris appears apprehensive. And later, as Laurie watches the night sky at a park, Eris explains to Kyo that in the past, the Keishan's forebearers did horrible things to asteroids when they looked like them, which almost led to war between them. And though it was avoided and her forebearer's apology was accepted, she still feels linked to her history, so she doesn't know what she'd possibly say to Laurie. But Kyo understands her and decides to handle Laurie on his own. So afterwards, Kyo is called Itokazu so she can drive him and Laurie, having figured she'd enjoy being with a robot from outer space, which she does until she sees her kitty ears. Though Laurie notices Eris isn't accompanying them, but tells Kyo it's okay, and to tell Eris she doesn't want to trouble her and that it's all in the past for her, as she only wishes for everyone to be happy and get along. And later, Kyo has taken her to a beach, and finding it pretty, finds it a fitting place to grant her master's wish, explaining that 800 years ago, the Keishan's technology was suddenly able to now reach trillions of potentially habitable worlds, and her ship's captain, her master, kind and brave, who she takes pride in by chance, chose the Earth. But their warp failed, and they got trapped in an alternate dimension. But in the long time they spent there, her captain repeated that if they found people on Earth, he would look up at the night sky and sing a song from that world, which is what she came to fulfill, as she begins singing the song she heard on her way here, about a lonely spaceman. And then, with her wish fulfilled, she left Earth. Afterwards, Sheikah meets with Kyo and Eris, but she talks about Laurie, because when asteroids lose their master, they are given two choices, to select a new master or refuse measures that will prolong their life. And she chose the latter, so she only has little time left. As later, Kyo reflects on the asteroids, and Eris looks sad at the night sky, but then brings out a smile, and Laurie in the spacecraft decides to look at the Earth until the very end, as she then finally rests in the ocean. Jen shoots a blast from a gigantic base in space, while on Earth it's almost Christmas and Kyo's with his friends at a mall. But Manami tells Futaba it's her time to strike for Kyo, while he's still just friend with Eris, and implies as Eris' mating season is off, to be the one who does it with him instead. But as she's dumbfounded, Kyo suddenly tells Futaba, "I want you," making her pass out. But he just wanted her to know he found DVDs on sale. Meanwhile, the Keishans are seeing a Christmas movie, and after learning what Christmas is about, they decided to share gifts as well, starting Operation Santa Claus. But a warning suddenly goes off because satellite scrap is going at their direction, but they know it's from the Dagashwans, as they've been launching harassment debris to annoy them, which they simply destroy again. Meanwhile, Futaba is buying a present for Kyo, but she's nervous. And meanwhile, Kun decides to go greet Earth's dignitaries as well as give Kyo a Christmas present. and she's later gulping down food in his home. When then she brings out Kyo's gift, but from her bell. Because while low-ranking officials' bells are only for communication, senior ones can alter the atomic composition of anything. It also works as storage, and Kyo's gift is his own combat power suit. Though Eris is sad as she didn't want Kyo to fight, Kyo actually wants to help them all when the time comes. But while that happens, Jens begins making her move with dog asteroids in space. Though while a jealous Manami sees Kyo with vacations from her house, Futaba shows up, who's bought a fighting movie DVD for Kyo as her gift. But Manami's mad because she wanted her to pick up a romantic movie so they could kiss while watching it. But while Futaba's embarrassed at this, she assures her she's happy the way things are now. But Manami says she must act, assuring her that she'll end up regretting otherwise. But suddenly, a truck goes right at them, and though they dodge it, Futaba's gift gets destroyed. But the truck's manually controlled as it crashes into Kyo's house and releases a gas that renders their asteroids useless. And from it, Dagishuan's asteroids begin attacking them. And in space, the Caitians have their ship invaded by Dagishuan's asteroids, who avoided detection by being inside all the harassment debris they blew up, bombing their way in with Axel form cards, which they also used to freeze the Caitian crew in time. But the Caitians managed to isolate the bridge using hyperspace away from them. While on Earth, Kun's surprised by them, who ejects something in her. And after Eris takes them down, Kun hands Kyo her bell as she passes out. But while Eris verifies she's alive, she also detects they shot nanomachines in her brain, which keep her unconscious and can't use her device on her, not knowing how the nanomachines will react. But then they receive a transmission from the Caitians on the ship's bridge informing of the attack. But that the ship's also lost control, and in 2 weeks it'll crash against the Earth. But while Eris plans on going on Luros, she informs she's under attack and suddenly lose contact. From the sea, a strange-looking machine arises. Meanwhile, Manami tries comforting Futaba about her destroyed gift, though Futaba figures prisons aren't really her thing. Afterwards, they're all informed that while the Caitian ship's impact might extinct life on Earth, its programmed self-destruct if it approaches a planet without reducing velocity. But this would kill the frozen-in-time crew, and can't redirect the ship as it can only be done by the ship's captain, with the Dagishuans deliberately kept alive as to not trigger the command chain. And with hope seemingly lost to rescue the crew, Kun's bell suddenly wraps itself around Kyo's neck, because Kun handed it to him, which in turn has made him the ship's captain to everyone's shock. And with this, Eris instructs Antonia to buy a rocket, which while Earth's rockets might not be enough to reach that quickly into space, she reveals she'll use Luros with it, revealing she's still alive as the strange-looking machine from the sea, her ship's incredibly tough central core, arrives there. And to rescue the crew, they meet with Ichika, who, figuring the Dagishuans trafficked with Axel cards, hands them ones that'll unfreeze the crew. But back in Kyo's home, they see that the worlds somehow found out the Caitian ship was attacked and is now plunging towards Earth, while Antonia then calls, informing that all the usable rockets have somehow been bought already. As we see that this was all Gina's plan, who had the world's nations secure all rockets to intercept the Caitian ship. But afterwards, with Antonia now there, Eris comes up with an idea, to have Chayo rearrange the matter into a ship's fuselage. But just that, as one can only make what they can exactly imagine, so they'll need to get an engine first. But Maya knows of one for sale, in Russia. And so they travel to a military base there and meet General Arashikawa, who takes them to an underground rail mobile missile base where they get the engine. But someone's spying them. Afterwards, Kyo begins thinking on the fuselage, but Manami suddenly approaches him, asking what he'll do after all this regarding Eris and Futaba. Though Futaba happens to overhear them as Manami tries making Kaio realize Futaba's into him, but Kyo's too obtuse for it, which angers her, and just tells him to think about it later to his confusion. But afterwards, distracted by this, Kyo's suddenly attacked by the spy. And Manami, meanwhile, is confronted by Futaba, angry at what she tried to do in a moment like this, as this could mess with Kyo's head in battle. But Manami reproaches her instead because this could be the last time they see Kyo, or if they live, Kyo might just get closer to Eris. But Futaba knows Manami's still in love with Kyo, asking if she's okay with not knowing Kyo's answer either. And while Manami's shocked, Futaba calls her a nosy meddler for trying to have others express their feelings while she herself can't. But Manami slaps her at this, but Futaba slaps back. But the alarms suddenly go off due to intruders. And after Manami and Futaba split up, Futaba runs into the intruder with Kyo hostage, threatening to blow up the base. But he's the same guy who blew the ship up in her operation time ago, who somehow survived, and who recognizes Futaba, but who mocks her, as she fights for a country she doesn't love and a planet she doesn't know, calling her nothing but a killer. But Futaba decidedly unloads her gun on him with the quasi-antimatter bullets, disarming him as he's then restrained. But the intruder calls Arashikawa as the traitor for selling his country's property like this. But then, Antonia warns that NATO battalions are on their way here on a mission to destroy a base taken over by terrorists and will arrive in 3 hours. But in that time, Kyo rearranges the structure of warheads into the ship's fuselage and are almost ready to take off. With Kyo, Eris, Manami, Futaba, and their assistroids on board, they have to wait 30 minutes until the ship's fueled up. But as the NATO battalion will arrive before that, the others decide to fight them. But while that happens, Manami tries not thinking on her still-loving Kyo, while Futaba thinks on the intruder's words, recognizing she's a killer, unfit to fall in love. But when Eris begins talking to Kyo, Manami insists on Futaba to confess before it's too late. But Futaba confronts her back, knowing Manami has held back all this time, while still wanting to be with Kyo. Though Eris tries stopping their argument, Manami claims this is her fault as she thought she'd always be with Kyo, up until Eris showed up knowing she couldn't compete against her, and ended up realizing she hadn't given up on him. It only pushed for Futaba to be with Kyo, figuring Futaba give up or quarrel with Eris, but it didn't go right. But Eris recognizes this as Kyo being someone very important to her, just like Futaba. And figures, the three of them can be Kyo's lovers as relationships on Earth off the book are fine, which shocks them, and Kyo ends up confused. Meanwhile, as the battle rages on outside, the ship's now fueled up and so they take off. And now they're in space. But Jen sends flying saucers and herself to attack them. And as Manami and Futaba make up, they figure they don't care as it's the end. And so Futaba kisses Kyo. And so does Manami. And Eris, jealous, does so as well. And then they all change into battle uniforms, as their mission is now to defend Kyo. So he reaches the Caitian's ship, as in the vacuum of space, while Luros has the asteroids quickly build a warp engine. The girls fight off the Dagashuan's army, and after the engine's ready, Kyo manages to go into hyperspace and crashes right into the Caitian's ship. And with this, the Caitians from the bridge decide to counterattack as the asteroids unfreeze the crew members with Ichika's Axel form cards, and Kyo now dons his new power suit, which allows him to rescue the Caitians. And then he's taken to the computer room to restart the ship's directional system. But the computer rejects him because only a Caitian can give high-ranking orders to it. But they come up with something, using the bell to make himself a Caitian, which he tries. Meanwhile, Eris, Futaba, and Manami are fighting against Jen's spaceship. But they take the upper hand, and with their combined power, they directly hit it as it crashes against the Dagashuan's own base. But this has made it plunge towards the Earth and will fall on Okinawa. But as Eris' propeller fails, Futaba reads that if they increase its re-entry angle, he'll burn up in the atmosphere. But as Futaba's thrust is not enough, Manami helps her up. But they know it's a one-way ticket, and so does Eris, who desperately tries to find a way to save them, but she can't find any. And Futaba and Manami make peace with this. But suddenly, Kyo's ship arrives there as Eris has them hold her hand, saving them right before the ship disintegrates. And so, they all hug Kyo. But he now has cat ears and tail, to their shock. Sometime later, with the Caitians now above Earth, Kuna's now the ship's captain again, who's ready to deploy Operation Santa Claus. And on Earth, Kyo explains how he became a Caitian, though still had to return to being human. But suddenly, Itokazu warns them all of something outside in the sky, which Eris recognizes as an orbital elevator, a device that allows one to reach space without rockets. The Caitian's Christmas present to the Earth, but its supercooling system is also causing the water vapor around it freeze, which in turn makes it snow in Okinawa, a miracle of a white Christmas. And meanwhile, Ichiba drops her hat, revealing she's actually a Caitian. OVA 1. Ichika visits a reserved restaurant where she finds Kyo and his friends playing cards, though Futaba and Manami appear very locked in for some reason. While we see that hours ago, Kuna, Chika, Melwin, and Dural were playing mahjong in Kyo's home. But the version with school uniforms, because this is the custom on Earth according to Eris material, leaving Melwin butt naked. While Eris said she'd be conducting a field examination today. Who's eating food? Though she actually invited her friends over, as her work today is to survey how Earthlings play in their pastimes, so she'll play with them to understand them. And also invited Antonia, who reserved and invited them to this restaurant. But Manami claims they'll need to make it exciting, so Eris gets the true essence of this. So they play for a prize. Though with this, Antonia tries having the prize be a suitcase full of money, but that no longer make it just a game anymore. So Maya proposes they use the model of the divine embodiment instead, which is a figure of Eris with an ancestroid, though Manami doesn't want it. But Sarah instead proposes a behind-the-scenes DVD from the film Kyo's Club made the other day, which Eris helped shoot, which has various shoots of Kyo, including him changing clothes. Kyo is shocked, but Manami and Futaba decide to play for it, to his dismay. But Eris decides to bring in a prize too, of cats that came in a chocolate egg Kyo gifted her, which she treasures. But then, they suddenly receive a package, which has the film Kawasaki made of Futaba and Manami, recorded thanks to many hidden cameras in the powerboat to their shock, which Eris decides will also be a game prize, which Kyo accepts as payback to their dismay. And so in the present they now play for this. While the Caitians are now playing poker and Dural is now winning. And while Kyo and his friends play cards, it's not going well for Manami, who ends up giving Kyo the victory to her dismay as Kyo takes his club's DVD with him. To their disappointment, but still can't relax, having to get Kawasaki's film. After that, they now play Nahappily. But Antonia easily wins it thanks to her capitalist prowess and recovers the divine embodiment's figure. But later, they now play Tracker, which is basically Twister. But this leads to Kyo putting his face between Manami's breasts and then behind Futaba's ass. Though Eris then tries using her tail as a limb, but as Manami protests, she uses her arm instead, making her breasts touch Kyo, to Manami's anger, who changes her mind. But her tail brushes past Futaba's ass, making her and everyone besides Eris fall, so she wins, and she chooses to recover her cats. And now it's time for the last game, Rock, Paper, Scissors, which the Caitians are also playing, and they're beating Durrell. While Kyo ended up being blindfolded, but he's winning regardless against all of the girls as they all strip butt naked. Besides Antonia, who takes her kitty ears off instead, but this makes Manami wrestle with her, which makes Antonia's ear break as Manami accidentally takes Kyo's blindfold off, who now sees them all naked and ended up beaten up. But he's won the girls' film, to their dismay. But he actually gives it to them though with the condition that they later show it to him, to their dismay.